No, you haven't misread the title of this video. We are going to be looking at that song, that 53-second song off the White Album, in more depth, in as much depth as you possibly can. This will probably be a very short video, but when I started this series, it seems like a while ago now, but it's only a few episodes back, I said we'd be doing every track on the White Album, which unfortunately includes this one, and another track that comes towards the end of the album. I bet you can guess which one that's going to be. Anyway, yes, welcome back to the White Album in Depth. This is episode 5, Wild Honey Pie. On August 20th, 1968, Paul McCartney was working at Abbey Road Studios on the song Mother Nature's Son. That's a song we will get to in a later episode. Anyway, Paul finished that song, so he decided with some time to kill that he would start working on something else. He would improvise something. He was feeling very experimental. Now, at the time, John and Ringo were in another studio in Abbey Road working on some other White Album tracks, whereas George, he'd buggered off on holiday to Greece. So yeah, Paul was alone. He was the only one working on this song. Now, if you can't tell from listening to Wild Honey Pie, Paul made this song up on the spot. Yeah, literally in the studio, he made it up as he went along. He was just feeling experimental. He had time to kill. John and Ringo didn't need him. George was away, so, you know, why not? Why not experiment? So he started off by recording a guitar track. He then multi-tracked that guitar track on top of itself to give it this sort of wacky flavour, because why not? After that, he started applying layer upon layer upon layer of harmonies onto the track. This was him just singing honey pie, and then at the end he would sing I love you honey pie. Just very basic stuff really. After doing that, he was back on the guitar. This time he was pulling the strings as hard as he possibly could, as far out as he possibly could, to give it this sort of mad, wacky sound. I mean, why wouldn't you pull your strings as far as you possibly could? And yeah, that was basically it. That was Wild Honey Pie finished. Now, in case you haven't picked up on it somehow, this song obviously references a song of Paul's that comes later on the White Album called Honey Pie. We will get to Honey Pie in a later episode. It comes quite late on the White Album, so it'll be a much later episode. But we will get to it eventually. It's a better song than this one anyway. It's Angie. In case you can't tell, I mean, it's a bit shit, like it's supposed to have the very intro of Angie. A song with Wild Honey Pie in it. So during this session, as well as finishing Mother Nature's Son, as well as recording Wild Honey Pie, Paul actually worked on a third song called Etc. Now, Etc, some of you are thinking, what the hell is Etc? Well, to us hardcore Beatles fans, Etc is quite a well-known song, except it's not. It's got a bit of a legendary status about it because this song has never been released. It wasn't on any of the anthology albums. It wasn't on the 50th anniversary edition of the White Album. It's never been released. There are no bootlegs of it out there either. So nobody other than Paul McCartney has ever heard this song. Well, Paul and the people that obviously worked on it with him in the studio. Apparently Paul was intending to give this song to Marianne Faithfull, but Marianne turned it down. She didn't want it. And the Beatles didn't want it either, so yeah, it never got released. It never even got worked on properly. The music of Etc was reworked, however, into the song Thingy-my-bob, which is by the Applesine band, the Black Dyke Mills Band. It's an instrumental thing, it's sort of like a big band brass thing. It gives you absolutely no indication of what Paul's version would sound like. But yeah, it exists. It was one of the first things that Apple actually put out. Now, based on accounts of those who were present in the studio when Paul recorded Etc, the song actually did have lyrics. It even had a bridge and an intro, which is described as being similar to the intro of Here, There and Everywhere. So Paul himself hasn't really spoken about the song Etc all that much, but on the few occasions that he has, he's been very dismissive of it. He said himself that he was glad it didn't see the light of day, that it never got released, because it wasn't very good. However, engineer Alan Brown, who was present in the studio when Paul recorded it, described it as a very beautiful song. No tape of the recording of Etc apparently exists in the vaults of Abbey Road, which is where all the Beatles recordings are held, all the master tapes and stuff, but there's nothing of Etc that is held in there, which would be why it's never seen the light of day on the likes of Anthology 3 and the 50th anniversary edition of the White Album. But Paul apparently owns the one and only tape of this song in his own personal archive, so maybe one day he'll release it. I doubt it, but maybe one day. Or maybe it'll leak. Someone at MPL might leak it, who knows? If you work at MPL, you know what to do. Right, that's enough about etc. I should probably go back to speaking about Wild Honey Pie, which is what I'm going to be talking about. In case you haven't noticed, I'm trying to fill time a bit here because there's not a lot to say. Anyway, Wild Honey Pie was never actually intended to go on the White Album. It was just supposed to be Paul messing about. He didn't really intend for it to go on. But it did go on the album, obviously, and the reason it went on the album was because George's wife, Pattie Boyd, she liked the song, so they put it on, simply because Pattie liked it. So yeah, when the White Album was released on the 22nd of November 1968, Wild Honey Pie was track number 5 on the album. So there's no denying really that Wild Honey Pie, it is filler. The album will be absolutely no different without it. But it's also inoffensive. It's not doing any harm. I mean, at the end of the day, it's 53 seconds long. It's not like it's 9 minutes of utter nonsense. We'll get to a song that is like that. But yeah, it's innocent enough. It's just Paul messing about for 53 seconds. I mean, he's not doing any harm, really. But yeah, if this album was to be condensed down to a single album, I think it's fair to say Wild Honey Pie would not be on the single album. I do feel, however, that Wild Honey Pie adds to the charm of the White Album. This is the 5th track on the album, and so far, all 5 tracks couldn't really be any different. The first track was just an all-out rock and roll song. The second track was this sort of folk song, folk rock, folk pop, whatever you want to call it. The third track was a psychedelic rock song, the 4th track was a reggae inspired song, and now the 5th track we're on this sort of experimental lo-fi kind of track. Yeah, that's 5 very different tracks, and you know, that's one of the brilliant things about the White Album, the fact that there are so many different genres on it, and there are still so many different genres to come. So yeah, that concludes this episode of the White Album in depth. It's been a quick one for a quick song. Really, there was not a lot to say about it, but if you have enjoyed this, please do consider clicking subscribe, it would mean a lot. If you want to see the other videos in this series, you can go on my channel. There is a playlist there called The White Album in Depth. You'll find all the previous episodes, plus all future episodes will go into that folder. So, join me next time on The White Album in Depth, where we will be posing a very important question. What did Bungalow Bill kill? But until then, do take care.